The exile. The transmission ended, and Admiral Helena Reyes stared silently at the blank screen. The Galactic Council's decision had been unanimous. Earth was to be isolated, cut off from all interstellar travel and communication, quarantined like a disease they feared might spread. "They're afraid of us," she said to the assembled Joint Chiefs and world leaders filling the emergency bunker beneath Geneva. "Not of what we've done, but of what they believe we might become." The Council's ambassador, a tall, reedy Taurian with glistening blue skin, had delivered the verdict with the emotionless tone typical of his species. Earth was deemed unpredictably aggressive, evolutionarily unstable, and a potential existential threat to galactic harmony. The quarantine would be enforced by a network of automated defense platforms positioned at the edge of the solar system, programmed to destroy any vessel attempting to leave. President Okafor's voice cut through the stunned silence. "They've made their decision. Now we make ours." His eyes met each leader in turn. "Will we accept this exile, or will we show them exactly why they were right to fear us?" The decision wasn't really a question. In the 3 decades since humanity had first encountered the Galactic Council, Earth had always been treated as a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. They had been granted observer status, a lot of limited trade, but never a vote, never a say in galactic affairs. The Council, comprised of 12 species who had achieved interstellar travel millennia before humans, had always regarded humanity with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. "They've given us 100 years, General Zhang said, reviewing the transmission details. "A century of isolation before they'll reconsider our status. They think they're being merciful." "Then we have 100 years to prepare," Reyes replied. Outside the bunker, across every continent, city and village, humanity received the news with the same initial shock, followed by the same steely resolve. The stars had been within reach, and now they were being taken away, but only temporarily. In Houston, Dr. Eliza Chen, head of NASA's Propulsion Research Division, gathered her team. "They've closed the door on conventional drives," she told them. "So we find the windows. We find the cracks. 100 years to develop what they think is impossible." In Bangalore, Vikram Mehta, CEO of the world's largest AI consortium, initiated Project Prometheus. "They believe our technology is primitive," he told his board. "Let's use that misconception to our advantage." In Lagos, the Pan-African Coalition of Scientists began consolidating research on materials that could evade the Council's detection systems. The quarantine had been meant to contain humanity, to prevent what the Council saw as a potential threat. Instead, it united Earth's disparate nations with a singular purpose: to break free and return to the stars stronger than before. 20 years into the exile, the Earth bore little resemblance to the planet the Council had abandoned. The threat of isolation had accelerated technological development beyond what even the most optimistic futurists had predicted. Dr. Chen's impossible windows had become reality, working in a research facility buried deep beneath the Mariana Trench, hidden from the Council's occasional surveillance probes. Her team had developed the first prototype of what would become humanity's greatest achievement: the phase shift drive. "It doesn't break the laws of physics," she explained to Admiral Reyes, now Supreme Commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces. "It merely sidesteps them." The demonstration chamber contained a small model spacecraft suspended in a containment field. At Chen's command, the craft shimmered, became translucent, and then vanished entirely. "It hasn't moved in the traditional sense," Chen continued. "It's shifted slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. The Council's sensors are calibrated to detect matter in our phase of reality. They can't see what exists between the states they understand." Reyes watched as the craft reappeared. "And this can be scaled up for actual vessels. We're already building the first prototype warship, the Defiance." Across Earth, other breakthroughs were transforming human civilization. Meta's AI systems had evolved into a distributed quantum network that outperformed any computing technology the Council had ever revealed. Molecular manufacturing had resolved resource scarcity. Cold fusion had made energy practically limitless. But the most significant changes were cultural. Humanity no longer thought in terms of nations or borders. The exile had created a shared identity, a common purpose. Children born after the quarantine grew up learning not just Earth history, but galactic politics. They studied the weaknesses of Council species, the vulnerabilities in their philosophies and technologies. They were being raised not just as Earth's future, but as architects of its return to the stars. 50 years into the exile, Earth was ready to test its new capabilities. The Defiance, now a fully operational warship, prepared for its first mission beyond the solar system. Admiral Rice, her hair now gray but her resolve undiminished, addressed the crew from the bridge. The Council believes we are still contained, still licking our wounds in isolation. Today, we proved them wrong. The ship's phase shift drive engaged, and the massive vessel slipped between the dimensions of reality, becoming invisible to the Council's monitoring network. The automated defense platforms, designed to target conventional ships, registered nothing as the Defiance passed silently through their perimeter. Beyond the solar system, the ship reverted to normal phase, appearing suddenly in orbit around Proxima Centauri, the closest exoplanet to Earth. The planet had been designated as a minor mining outpost by the Council, operated primarily by automated systems with minimal organic supervision. "No alarms," reported Lieutenant Commander Osei from the tactical station. "Their systems haven't registered our arrival. Proceed with the landing operation," Rise ordered. A team led by Colonel Ramirez descended to the planet's surface, where they quickly secured the mining facility. The handful of Council representatives, mostly Vendari and Raxian technicians, surrendered without resistance, too shocked by humanity's sudden appearance to organize any defense. "You can't be here," the senior Vendari supervisor protested as he was escorted to a holding area. "Earth is quarantined. This is impossible." Ramirez allowed herself a small smile. "We're redefining what's possible." The liberation of Proxima Centauri was merely a test, a proof of concept. The facility was small enough not to warrant immediate Council attention when communications ceased, but significant enough to provide valuable intelligence and resources. Back on the Defiance, Rise received the first download of data from the facility's networks. "We have access to their current communication protocols, security clearances, fleet deployments," she informed Earth Command. "The Council has been busy while we've been away. There's evidence of growing discord among the member species. Can we exploit these divisions?" asked President Diallo, the fifth world leader since the exile began. "More than that," Rise replied. "We found others like us, species the Council has marginalized, restricted, or outright oppressed, potential allies." 70 years into the exile, Earth had established a shadow presence throughout the neighboring star systems. The phase shift technology had enabled the creation of hidden outposts, listening posts, and eventually entire colonies on worlds the Council had deemed uninhabitable or unimportant. The Defiance had been joined by an entire fleet of similar vessels, each incorporating improvements beyond the original design. Using the intelligence gathered from Proxima Centauri and subsequent operations, Earth had begun cautious diplomatic outreach to other species chafing under Council rule. The Nezdari, a silicon-based species whose homeworld had been stripped for resources, were the first to formally ally with Earth. Their natural ability to communicate through subspatial frequencies made them invaluable for coordinating resistance activities outside Council monitoring. The Kithrik, relegated to second-class status due to their supposedly primitive psychological development, proved to be brilliant tacticians when given access to human military theory and technology. With each new ally, Earth's sphere of influence grew, still hidden from the Council's awareness, operating in the blind spots of their vast but complacent network. Admiral Rice, now approaching her 90s but kept vital by medical advancements, met with the expanding coalition of resistance leaders aboard the Vindication, Earth's newest flagship. The Council believes they have another 30 years before they need to reconsider our status, she told them. We don't intend to wait for their assessment. The holographic display showed the Arcturus system, home to one of the Council's major military installations. Our intelligence indicates the Council will be holding an unscheduled session there in 2 months to address growing concerns about unexplained disruptions to their operations. All 12 principal members will be present. Nezdari Ambassador Kivith's crystalline body shimmered with nervous energy. This is accelerating faster than anticipated. Are we prepared for open confrontation? We've been preparing for 70 years, Rice replied. And we won't be alone. The display shifted to show fleet positions, not just Earth vessels, but ships from a dozen different species, all waiting in phase-shifted hibernation near key Council worlds and installations. When we reveal ourselves at Arcturus, our allies will simultaneously secure critical Council infrastructure throughout the galaxy, not to destroy, but to hold, to force negotiation from a position of strength. The Kithric General Talmok leaned forward, his scaled hands clasped tightly. And if they refuse to negotiate? Rhea's expression hardened. Then they will learn why they were right to fear us in the first place. The coalition departed with a new understanding. The Council's decision to exile Earth had not prevented a threat. It had created one, a threat now poised to reshape the galactic order. As the Vindication prepared to lead the fleet to Arcturus, Rice stood alone in her ready room, looking at a photograph taken a lifetime ago. Herself as a young officer, standing proudly in front of the first human embassy to the Galactic Council. So much hope then, so much naivety. We wanted to join them as equals, she murmured to herself. Now they'll have no choice but to accept us as such. The console chimed with a priority message from Earth Command. The final authorization had been given. Operation Reckoning would commence in 48 hours. Humanity's exile was about to end, not with a petition for remittance, but with a demonstration of power that would send shockwaves across the galaxy. The Council had feared what humanity might become. Now they would face what they had created. The return. The Arcturus system shimmered with activity as the Council's emergency session convened. Warships from all 12 principal species formed a protective perimeter around the massive station where the delegates had gathered. None of them detected the fleet of phase-shifted vessels silently taking position. Inside the Council chamber, High Counselor Vrax of the Taurians called for order. The reports cannot be dismissed any longer, he announced, his blue skin flushed dark with stress. Something is systematically disrupting our outlying operations. 27 facilities have gone silent in the past solar cycle. The pattern is consistent with coordinated military action, added Counselor Shield of the Raxians, her feathered crest bristling. But none of our security systems have detected unauthorized fleet movements. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Doman of the Vendari, we should consider the possibility that our exiled friends from Earth have found a way to circumvent the quarantine. The suggestion was met with derision from several delegates. Impossible, scoffed Counselor Grath of the Ulgorians. Human technology was primitive when we contained them. Even with a century of development, they couldn't have advanced enough to escape our detection grid. At that precise moment, Admiral Helena Reyes gave the order aboard the Vindication. All ships, disengage phase shift. Weapons at ready, but hold fire unless fired upon. Throughout the Arcturus system, Earth's fleet materialized simultaneously. 50 warships, each larger and more advanced than anything in the Council's arsenal, appearing as if from nowhere directly inside their defensive perimeter. At the same instant, similar scenes played out across the galaxy as the Coalition's forces revealed themselves at key Council installations. In the Council chamber, alarms blared as the security systems finally registered the presence of the human fleet. Counselors, came Rhea's voice over the chamber's communication system. I bring greetings from Earth. We thought we'd save you the trouble of reconsidering our status. We've reconsidered it ourselves. Stunned silence fell over the assembly. This is an act of war. Vrax finally managed, rising to his feet. No, Reyes corrected. This is a correction of a historical injustice. Your ships are currently surrounded not just by Earth vessels, but by ships from a dozen species you've marginalized over the centuries. Look to your displays. Every major Council installation across the galaxy is now under similar observation. The counselors frantically check their consoles, confirming with horror the truth of Reyes' words. "What do you want?" asked Shield, already calculating that negotiation might be their only option. For starters, a new seat at the table. Actually, several new seats. The Battle of Arcturus, as it would later be known, lasted less than an hour. After the initial shock wore off, several Council commanders, predominantly Olgorian and Cephite, ordered their ships to engage the human fleet, believing superior numbers would prevail. They were wrong. The phase shift technology that had allowed Earth's vessels to arrive undetected also made them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Human ships would shift partially out of phase, allowing enemy fire to pass harmlessly through them, then shift back to normal space to return fire with devastating precision. Moreover, Earth's weapons systems operated on principles the Council had never encountered. Gravity-lensing torpedoes that could bend space around enemy shields, quantum disruptors that temporarily altered the fundamental forces holding ships together. When the Vindication disabled the Olgorian flagship by simply phasing directly through its hull and deploying internal dampening fields that neutralized all onboard systems without harming the crew, the remaining Council forces stood down. From her command chair, Reyes watched the battle's conclusion with a mixture of satisfaction and regret. "Casualties?" she asked. "Minimal, Admiral," reported Commander Osoi. 17 Council crew confirmed dead, mostly from systems overloads when they tried to push their weapons beyond safety parameters. No fatalities on our side, though the Resolute took damage to its starboard phase modulators. Reyes nodded. The restraint shown by Earth's forces had been calculated, a demonstration of both superior capability and ethical restraint. "Open a channel to the Council station." On the main view screen, the faces of the 12 counselors appeared, their expressions ranging from fear to fury. "As you can see," Reyes stated calmly, "we could have destroyed your forces entirely. We chose not to. Remember that when we begin negotiations." 3 days later, representatives from Earth and its coalition allies sat across from the Council delegates in the same chamber where, a century earlier, humanity had been deemed too dangerous to join galactic society. Dr. Eliza Chen, now humanity's lead negotiator despite her advanced age, addressed the assembly. "The terms are straightforward. Earth and our allies will be granted full membership in a reformed council, with equal voting rights. The practice of quarantining species based on projected developmental trajectories will end, and a commission will be established to identify and integrate other marginalized species. You're dictating terms after an unprovoked attack," objected Councillor Vrax. "Unprovoked?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "You exiled our entire species based on fear of what we might become. Then you gave us a century to become exactly that. I'd call that provocation." Councillor Shield, more pragmatic than her colleagues, leaned forward. "What assurances do we have that Earth won't simply use its new position and clearly superior technology to dominate the Council? The same assurances you never gave us, the opportunity to prove ourselves through actions rather than prejudgment." Chen's gaze swept the chamber. "We could have conquered rather than negotiated. Remember that." As the negotiations progressed, rifts within the Council became increasingly apparent. The Raxians, Vendari, and Taurians, facing the reality of Earth's technological superiority, advocated for accommodation. The Olgorians and Cephites, traditionally the Council's military powers, resisted any concession. The deadlock broke when reports arrived of uprising across multiple Council worlds. Species that had watched Earth's return with hope were now demanding their own reconsideration. The Council faced not just a military defeat, but a social revolution. On the 5th day, the Galactic Concord was signed, a new charter replacing the ancient Council Compact. Earth and its allies received full membership status. The Coalition's forces began a coordinated withdrawal from Council installations, replaced by joint security teams drawn from both traditional Council species and newly recognized members. Admiral Reyes, watching the signing ceremony from the Vindication, allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The mission she had dedicated her life to was complete. Admiral. Commander Osei approached with a datapad. Earth Command sends their congratulations and instructions for our next deployment. Oh, Reyes raised an eyebrow. And where might that be? The Sagittarius Arm. There are indications of an expansionist empire beyond Council space that may pose a future threat. Command wants us to establish diplomatic contact from a position of strength. Reyes chuckled softly. From exiles to explorers in a week, humanity doesn't waste time, does it? 1 year after the Battle of Arcturus, the Galactic Concord headquarters on neutral Proxima Centauri had become the center of a transformed interstellar community. Species that had once been relegated to the margins of galactic society now contributed their unique perspectives and technologies to collective advancement. In a garden designed to accommodate the biological needs of dozens of different species, Admiral Reyes, recently retired and serving as Earth's senior ambassador, met with former Councilor Shiel, now the Raxian representative to the Concord. "I must admit," Shiel said, her feathers shifting in a pattern that indicated thoughtful reflection, "when we quarantined Earth, this outcome never occurred to us." "What outcome did you expect?" Reyes asked. "That you would either accept your isolation and develop a purely internal civilization, or that you would attempt escape and be destroyed by the defense grid." Shiel's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, the Raxian equivalent of a shrug. "The possibility that you would not only escape but return as the head of a coalition powerful enough to force reform, it was beyond our conception." "That was your fundamental mistake," Reyes replied. "You judged us by what we were, not by what adversity would shape us into. Humanity has always been defined not by our comfortable moments, but by how we respond to challenges. A quality we're beginning to appreciate," Shiel acknowledged. "Though some of my colleagues still fear what Earth might become in the centuries ahead." Reyes smiled. "They should, but not because we intend conquest or revenge. They should fear the possibilities we'll unlock together with species they dismissed, the advancements we'll achieve by combining perspectives they thought incompatible." The two stood in companionable silence, watching ships from dozens of worlds arriving and departing from the Concord station above, traffic patterns that would have been impossible under the old Council regime. "The phase shift technology," Shield said after a moment. "I'm curious, was it developed entirely after the quarantine, or had your scientists already begun the research before?" Reyes laughed softly. "Would you believe we got the idea from an ancient human entertainment called science fiction? Writers imagined such technology centuries before we had the means to create it. So in a sense, the Council feared not what you were, but what you imagined you might become." "Precisely. And by giving us reason to turn those imaginings into reality, they created exactly what they feared." Reyes gazed up at the stars, now filled with possibilities rather than boundaries. "The greatest lesson humanity learned from our exile is that limitations are often self-imposed. The Council believed they were containing a threat. Instead, they created a catalyst for their own evolution." "A costly lesson," Shield observed. "But a necessary one," Reyes countered. "For all of us." As night fell over Proxima Centauri, lights from the Concord headquarters illuminated the landscape, a beacon visible from orbit, a symbol of a new galactic order built not on fear of difference, but on the strength that comes from embracing it. The exile that had been meant to contain humanity had instead released its potential, not just for Earth, but for all the species that had been waiting for someone to challenge the old order. The stars that had once been denied to them were now their domain, and the future that spread before them was limitless. Humanity had returned to the galactic stage, not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as architects of a new age. The Council had feared what humans might become. Now they, and the rest of the galaxy, would witness it firsthand.